Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lungleng Show. Today, I have two special guests, and they are Sir Abhijit Banerjee and Madam Esther Duflo. And they are, the recipient of the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science. And they received this prize in the year 2019. So this is a great privilege and moment for us to, know a little bit more about them. And since they are here in Nagaland. Is it your first time to be in Nagaland, sir?
Yes, never been to. In fact, I've been to Meghalaya, but no further east.
By the way, what brought you all to Nagaland?
We were. I have a friend. I have many friends who have worked in this area, who talk a lot about how beautiful it is and how interesting it is, and that we should come. So I always had it in mind, and then we had a small vacation that we could squeeze in, and we thought, my wife Esther, she loves to trek, and so I came up with the idea of trekking Zugu Valley.
Mm-hmm. So you did it.
Yes.
How did you feel like trekking Zugu? Because Zugu is not easy to trek. You have to really walk for at least 4 or 5 hours something. How did you feel?
We loved it. It's really beautiful, just as advertised. It's magnificent.
Okay, glad to know that. I mean, since you have been a Nobel recipient of Nobel Prize, and if you can describe a little bit on what is it really about? We all know that it's in economics, and what is the specific work that you have done in economics that they awarded you this?
Why don't you start, Esther? I'll take you.
So we try to understand the economic lives of the poor in India, in Africa, in many other countries. Mm-hmm. And in particular, we have set up an organization called JPAL, which is a network of researchers that work with many NGO, government, civil society organizations around the world to test new innovation in policy making and see whether they work or whether they don't work.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. And as we don't get much time to talk to right now, I want to straight jump to a question. Since you're testing some of the policies and some of the interventions, what I would like to know is, let's say in case of India, MGNREGA, which was considered like to have raised or lifted 27 crores of the poverty in India, and World Bank has really commended it as well. From your estimation, how has it worked? And is it really the government of India really implementing seriously right now?
So, what we do professionally are what are called randomized control trials, which are like medical trials in the case of social interventions. So there might be we have done many in India on education, on transfers like NREGA, etc. But in the case of NREGA, there is no randomized control trial. The reason is that with a program that essentially immediately, the way it was introduced first in the poorest 100 districts, then the next 100 districts, etc. So it was never. You never randomly chose a control group, which would be similar to the other one. So therefore, people use other techniques and maybe less transparent techniques to evaluate the impact of it. But when you look at those studies, they find two things. One is, over time, the program becomes much more efficient in the sense that the amount of money that was originally sent did not match with the amount of money people said they received. That ratio went from something like 50% in Odisha to 85% over time. So it became more and more efficient. And the second thing they find is that it raises wages in the villages, and it makes and it has a substantial effect on both poverty and outmigration.
Mm-hmm. In fact, there was an RCT of running the program better. Mm-hmm. So when they introduced for the first time cards that a bit similar to Aadhaar system that allowed people to get their money more effectively. Mm-hmm. And what they found is, number one, this card helps, but they were able to do an RCT of that randomized control trial to compare places where people got these cards and automatic payment to their wages to other places where it didn't happen. And in the places where people got this card, they were more likely to participate in the program, and the wages went up, not just for the participant, but for everyone. And that's really one of the surprising and interesting finding about MNAGA. It's that the impact is really economy-wide, because it puts pressure on employers that they have to also pay their employee correctly. Otherwise, they will just work for MNAGA and not for them. And it turns out that they had space to do that, to increase wages and to increase production. So everybody was better off as a result.
Now, taking the opportunity to be seated, in front of the two Nobel laureates, I mean, I really want to understand, despite being China a socialist economy and communist ruled by one party, and India being a highly democratic country those days, and I mean, China also kind of liberalized the economy in 1978, India in 1991. So comparatively, both invested a lot in liberalizing the privatization of the economy, but China went away way too better than the Indian economy. Why did this happen from your analysis? We really want to understand that. So
let me start by saying, what we study are anti-poverty programs. We don't study the macroeconomics of China. I'll say one thing that's relevant to that, which is that to your question, without trying to really answer it, because I think that's not what I am known for or S is known for. So I don't see a reason why we should give unreliable opinions. But I think the one thing that is very important to know about China is that China at the beginning did a set of things that we had massive state intervention from the beginning in supporting a market economy. So the state in China still owns something like 2/3 of the capital stock. Nobody knows because some of it is owned by shadowy organizations that people think are controlled by the state. But the state has been extremely important. The state controls the banking sector. So when we talk about China being liberalized, China in a sense took a different path to liberalization than we did. And so I can't say whether that path was better or worse, but it's worth noticing that China never went with full privatization. It always had introduced a market economy, but the capital was at the beginning controlled by what are called the town and village enterprises. So communities were controlled a lot of the capital, and over time, the state, even the national state, owns a lot of the capital. So it's not by no means private sector dominated economy, despite being, having a very vibrant market economy.
And comparatively looking at Bangladesh also, I mean, when it comes to poverty, they have lesser amount of people living below poverty line. I mean, and when it comes to World Hunger Index also, India is way behind them. I mean, and since you both are working on alleviating global poverty, I mean, I would really love to understand why India, being such a huge economy, have to suffer with having at least about 60 million people, 60%, and it's more than 600 million people living still below poverty line. Why, being a rich country, India still has to suffer that?
True.
60% seems a lot.
No. You can fight with the numbers, but I don't think that it's more than. I think the government claims it's 9%. Maybe it's more than that, but it's not 60%. I think first order, we've done very well, not as well as maybe Bangladesh, but we've done very well in reducing extreme poverty. I don't think one should. I think we have failed in many ways, and you're right in saying that Bangladesh has been more successful in some ways, but I don't think it's worth starting with the 60% below the poverty line number. That number, you could set the poverty line at the US level, and then indeed 90% will be below the poverty line. But it's not an interesting question.
Then it would be the same in Bangladesh.
Okay, go ahead. But
there's a World Bank median, so I was just quoting
the World Bank. The World Bank number, according to the World Bank, if you take the, $1.92 a day at purchasing power parity, I think we are. Let's not fight over the exact details, but 15% would be kind of a reasonable estimate. I don't think anybody serious is claiming it's 60%, if that's the poverty line. If you take the World Bank's poverty line or the $2.65 or whatever it is, by none of them will you get anywhere close to 60%.
I see.
Okay, but on the Bangladesh question, I think.
Was it good?
No, I don't have anything to say. You want to add something about the Bangladesh question?
No, it's something. It's like comparing whole countries to each other is a little bit difficult. But one of the things that has happened in Bangladesh that has not happened as much in India is the much greater participation of women in the labor force.
I see.
Starting with young women working in factory for some time, and then in general, women are more likely to participate in the labor force. And in India, it's really something that the country need to grapple with. But it's really one of the countries in the world today where women labor force participation is at the lowest. It's lowest than in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
And that's, of course, women represent half of the creative and productive power of the society. So there is going to be a limit if they cannot be if it cannot be participated.
We cannot use women power.
So are we saying that the women folk in Bangladesh has a higher participation in the workforce?
Yes. Definitely.
I mean, I just wonder why did such disparity happen between the two neighboring countries, or what would be the cause?
I think Islam has always been more open to divorce. Okay. One thing that so it's a in that sense the status of women is it's a complicated question. Right. There are many things that are about status of women in Islam which are also to wear some countries in Iran you have to wear a hijab or something, but on the other hand they have divorce and Hindus don't approve of divorce. So there are systematic differences between the cultures, even though, there are many similarities.
Just one last question. And since you're being in Nagaland does not generate any revenue, and it survives on the central scheme and central, devolving of the money from the center side. Now the question is, when it comes to poverty, dealing with alleviating poverty in the case of Nagaland, can we just survive? Can we just do it from the central poverty alleviation schemes, or can that really solve the problem, or the state as a government has to do something about alleviating poverty for this in the state like Nagaland? Will that be sufficient, or?
I know nothing about, I don't know whether it's exactly true that the government is not doing anything. There's tax revenue that the government is collecting. The central devolution is, after all, state. When the state pays into the national tax kitty, both direct and indirect taxes, that's part of what the Finance Commission sent. So I don't know whether Nagaland is particularly an extra recipient of outside money or not. So that's part of the reason I hesitate to say anything. But in general, I don't see why. There's young people, there seem to be interest in education. I hope Nagaland can also become a vibrant economy on its own.
Probably that's largely responsible to Article 371A, which is a special provision for the state, and utilization and unearthing of natural resources are mostly prohibited, and no investment comes in. In general. So I wish we could talk and deal much deeper on this economics of the country and the state, but I can understand your time. So thank you so much for coming on my show, and I wish that you enjoy your travel and stay in Nagaland for the few days.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful to stay in Nagaland. Thank you.
Thank you so much.